Today's presentation is on how do I generate income in a COVID environment. Obviously, the last 6-7 months have been crazy with COVID and share markets and bond markets and so forth, and what's been happening worldwide with COVID. So today I thought I'd just go over just a few things on the generation of income and just a few little topics that I've put aside just to discuss and go through. My name is Michael Schnabel. I'm a senior financial planner with Wealthways, and I do specialise in the area of pre-retirement, retirement, and also in aged care. So without waiting any further, we'll kick on into the presentation. Now, as part of the agenda, we'll be looking at why we should be considering a lifetime annuity. It's one of those things that we can just I'll just touch on and just go over the experience I've had in the recent past just with discussing this particular type of strategy. Also, why we should review our current super pension investment strategies and investment options and your outlook. So I'll be going through that agenda, and I'll just go through each slide in part one by one and just cover a few little things and issues around that. Now, the presentation itself is just general. There's no specific personal advice here. I'll be just generally covering the topics as I go through. And obviously, if there's any interest there or if it sparks some comments or anything like that, I'm happy to sort of discuss that in a little bit more detail with you in the future. So again, why should we consider a lifetime annuity? It's something that a lot of people haven't looked at in the past, and although I have mentioned it to a number of clients, and I guess why they, could be considered at this point in time is when we look at the term deposit rates, and I think the most we can get in term deposit rates now is for 12 months is something like 1.1, 1.2%. I think is probably the best rate. There may be some slightly better, but generally it's around that 1 to 1.2%. So it's a really, really low rate of return. So when you're considering part of your investment, particularly your defensive section, is likely to pick up about a 1% return, it makes it very challenging to have that income or produce that level of income or any sort of income really. So when we look at lifetime annuities as an option, when we look at the rates that they're offering, they can be upwards of around 2.5%. So you are getting a rate that is double and sometimes more than double what your term deposit rates are. And I guess where it becomes a really big advantage is when you are on Centrelink benefits. So for those clients that have monies, say around the $400,000 to $500,000 mark, going up towards that $1 million mark, Centrelink benefits are potentially a viable option, and they do tend to drop off quite quickly when you're above that $500,000 asset limit. So if we can structure it where you can get enhanced Centrelink benefits, that can add an additional 3% to your overall return from that investment. So in theory, by putting $100,000 in, for example, into an annuity, we can potentially get something like a 5.5% return on your money. So it does, certainly from a guarantee point of view and from a defensive part of the portfolio point of view, it's certainly worthy to consider and investigate to see whether that's something that would be working for you or be an advantage for you. And I guess the other things there, it is guaranteed for life. The payments are indexed with inflation, and it will never run out. So if you live to 105, then this will keep paying to 105. So it does give that really, really good safety buffer. And I guess the other part of where this becomes attractive also is very, very late in life, if aged care becomes a consideration or an option, getting a guaranteed income from an annuity can certainly play a really big part in paying for and covering some of those aged care fees. So it's certainly a viable option to consider and certainly review, particularly as part of your defensive portfolio. Now, why should we review our current or future pensions strategies, investment or pension strategies? Now, I guess the question is, how long are we investing for? People at times come to me and say, look, I'm 65, and traditionally we've got to go a lot more conservative because we're now 65 and we should be going conservative. But when we look at what are our income needs, and the average future lifespan for someone at 65 is really upwards of 85 to 90 years of age. So we're talking about a 20-year time frame. So we're not talking short term, we are talking long term. So that gives us a bit of consideration then that, what the time frame and the sort of strategies we can look at. And a big part of what produces our return is that asset allocation. If we are a little bit more conservative, then our returns over time are going to be a lot lower. If we do take a little bit more growth within our investment portfolio, then we are likely to pick up a slightly better rate of return. So if we look over the last 90 years, growth investments such as shares have averaged about double the rate of return of what fixed interest investments have. So we are likely to get us a better and an increased rate of income and return on monies if we do take that little bit more growth allocation or risk within the portfolio. And when we look at the level of risk, over the last 90 years, there's been 26 occasions where the share market has had a negative return. In comparison, when we look at the bond, we like to think that fixed interest or bonds are all safe and have no risk whatsoever. But in 14 years over those 90-year period, we've had some negative returns in the bond market as well. So there's areas that do have that level of risk. And so the asset allocation is quite important to make sure that we do get the best value out of our monies and out of our investments. Fees are important, obviously, as well, and reviewing the level of fees that fund managers charge or platforms charge, and try and get the best value and pay for what you're getting and get good value from what you do pay in relation to fees. A couple of other options there. There's always new products coming on the marketplace, and not saying that they're all good, but things like credit funds or mortgage funds at times can look quite attractive. It does increase the risk a little bit in your defensive area, but it also can add a little bit of extra return. And that could be in the form of a 3 or 4% return versus a 1 or 2% return. So there's areas there that you can expand and look into from both fixed interest and share investments, which include a little bit of insurance type arrangements within the portfolio. Can also give that little bit of buffer as well, or that little bit of security to show that you can still invest in shares, but also have that little bit of security within the portfolio. So again, a number of different options to look at. Obviously, there's always trade-offs when we're considering those different products or different funds that are on the marketplace, but sometimes worth considering and having a look. Now, when we're looking at those that are pre-retirees and looking at how to get the best returns or values out of funds, reviewing different strategies in relation to what goes into super, for example, instead of concentrating on repaying debt and repaying mortgage and getting that mortgage down to the lowest possible value you can, well, let's pay the minimum payment and perhaps add money into superannuation. The interest you pay on home loans is around 3.5%. If you take a growth-oriented portfolio over time, you're likely to get an enhanced rate of return on your funds. So in effect, over say a 5 or a 10-year period, you could get quite a significantly increased level of asset value by redirecting how you go forward with your funds. So maximising contributions to get the most from the tax advantages that the government offer is there, and looking at different ways to redirect your cash flow to maximise your tax advantages and growth on monies to put you in a better position by the time you do get to that retirement age. Now, likewise, changing or confirming your outcomes, articulating your goals, being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and in a timely manner. So knowing exactly what you want is important to, again, start planning and putting some structure into place. When we talk about the retirement spending smile, quite often when retiring, the first 10 or 15 years, you spend quite a bit with holidays, with entertainment, etc. As you get a little bit older, you tend to spend a little bit less. But towards the latter part of retirement, your spending goes up again in a lot of cases for medical. So you do have a lot of expense at the beginning, tends to drop down a little bit towards the middle to latter part, and then come up again towards the latter part of retirement. So it's always bearing in mind to keep that, to keep those allocation and have monies available. Fate ratio is a good way to work out and Sandra Will's a retired planner from Wealthways, who came up with the ratio, looking at how to determine what sort of income that you need in retirement based on what you're currently spending now, because no one wants to take a pay cut when they retire. Certainly remaining focused on plans and any whatever decision you make with asset allocation or investments, there's always a different consequence to that. So knowing what they are is really important. And main thing is to be focused and be comfortable with your informed decisions. So what should you do now? Look, opportunities are always available, whether you're working or retired. I'm happy to book one in for a 15-minute health check just to see how you're tracking along and just make sure that you're on the right track. And obviously getting advice is really important. Thanks for joining us for this webinar. Happy to chat further at any point in time. michael@wealthmed.com.au is my email address, and the number here to the office, 1300 887 137. Thanks again for joining us for the presentation. And if there's any other questions down the track, happy for you to send an email off and happy to answer those. Once again, thank you for your time.